Hello to everyone. Welcome to today's program of the 19th Spiritist month, which we are starting today. The major theme, the central theme is obsessions regarding the Spiritist viewpoint. So we invite all of you who are with us from incarnates and disincarnates for us to initiate our meeting today with inner reflections that can help us to calm, to soothe our minds and hearts. For those who may choose to close your eyes, feel free to do so. That we may start to look within ourselves, harmonizing ourselves as essentially beings of love as we all are. Divine creatures in essence. Let's start by expressing our gratitude towards the Creator of everything and everyone, our loving Father, God. Thank you for our existences. Thank you for our experiences that you present to us for us to grow, to evolve, to progress, for us to learn to heal ourselves as immortal beings as we all are. Thank you for this unique moment in our existences, in our journeys, as we are all beings in evolution, brothers and sisters in humanity, learning to love ourselves, to love others, to love life, to love God. And with these vibrations of brotherhood, with our hearts soothed, with our minds connected towards goodness, united through the waves of universal fraternity, we start this meeting today. Once more, welcome everyone who is with us here. As I mentioned previously, we are starting today the 19th Spiritist month, which is a program that we organize every year in April in order to commemorate our date of foundation, which is the 18th of April. Now, we celebrate always in a way that we can carry on enlightening ourselves and nourishing ourselves through studies. So we invite all of you, and from today we start with the main theme, spiritual obsessions and mental health. And we have different lectures, different friends who are with us, presenting different themes to us. Today, we have the pleasure to have with us our dear friend from the United States, Beatriz Lopes. Let me introduce Beatriz, who is already here with us. She lives in New York in the United States. Beatriz is currently the Family, Youth, Children, Spiritist Education Director of the United States Spiritist Federation. She is a representative of the United States within the International Spiritist Council Youth Committee. Being a Spiritist since childhood, Bea had a remarkable opportunity to represent Spiritism globally at the United Nations at the age of 16. Since then, Bea has actively taken on various roles within the Spiritist community, from leading study groups to delivering lectures and organizing events like the annual Spiritist Youth Retreat. Professional, Bea is a quantitative consultant. In that way, we present Bea Lopes, and welcome once more within the Spiritist Psychological Society. It is a pleasure to having you here. And also say, since the beginning, thank you for allocating the time to be with us. And Bea will be presented the theme to us, chemical dependencies and soul, pain, self-healing. Just to let you know, everyone, by the end, Bea will be open for questions and answers. So those who are online with us, please present your questions through the chats that she will be open to respond to that. And in that way, I hand it over to you, Bea.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here today. And I'm so excited to be kicking off another year of this month where we're celebrating and studying Spiritism together, because already when we were doing that prayer, I feel so connected and so calm with all of the work you can see that's put into this. When we see this month full of all these wonderful presentations and people coming together from around the world to connect on a topic, on a theme, to discuss together, and all of us who are listening to be connecting our thoughts all together and learning together. It's really powerful, and I'm so excited to be here to kick off the month of April with this celebration of study and bring the first topic, which is chemical dependencies, soul pain, and self-healing. So when I got for this topic, I felt like, wow, this is a big topic. This is a harsh topic, and you all may be feeling that as well. What are we going to talk about with all of this? And it's interesting when we think of chemical dependencies or addictions, we think of things that are distant from us. We think of, oh, that's something that happens to other people over there, or that happens somewhere else. But the reality is this is happening all around us, all over the world, each and every day. There's been countless studies that show, just talking about drug addiction specifically, that there's millions and millions of people suffering drug addictions each and every day, let alone all the other forms of addiction and chemical dependencies that exist. And it's interesting, I found a United Nations study from this past year, from 2025, where they did research and collected data from 2023 and saw that out of people who were experiencing drug use disorder, only 1 in 12 of those millions of people, only 1 in 12 received any type of treatment. And it's really impactful to think about it, because 1 in 12 received treatment, meaning 11 out of 12 did not receive any type of treatment for this chemical dependency, this problem, this struggle in their life. And when we hear the statistics, it's already shocking. But it's important to take a moment that when we hear statistics, when we hear things like this, realizing that behind each of these numbers is a real person's life, right? When we say millions and millions of people around the world are suffering with chemical dependencies, unsure how to help themselves, think of each of those as individual people who have families, who have a community they live with, who have their lives that are going through struggles. And this is a shared reality that impacts all of us, because whether it's us ourselves that might be going through this, whether it's someone in our families, or even people in our communities, this has an impact on all of us. And we're seeing this every day. So while it might sound like something that is, oh, that's far away, or that's someone else, that's not me, it truly is impacting all of us, because we live in a society together. So throughout our lecture today, we'll talk a little bit about what are these chemical dependencies, but also what's beneath those chemical dependencies? What's the root of the problem that's really happening? And how can we truly work towards healing? That 1 in 12 that receives any kind of treatment, how can we really help in this healing for others and for ourselves? And so when we talk about chemical dependencies is when the body has a physical or psychological dependency on a substance, like drugs or alcohol is one of the main examples we think of. So a lot of times we think of a dependency as something psychological, meaning that I feel like I want to keep repeating this, right? You do something and you feel like you want to psychologically, but it's actually physically altering as well. It's physically dependent. Science has shown that drugs and alcohol and substances, they are chemically altering the brain, so that it's not just a desire that I want to keep doing this thing. My brain is altered to need it. And when we talk about chemical dependencies, and when you think of a lack of that dependency, if you remove that dependency, that's when people talk about the symptoms of withdrawals. And that's because the body is so physically in tune with that dependency that if you just removed it all at once without slowly going off of it, that person will physically feel a lot of symptoms, right? They'll feel digestive issues, they'll feel headaches, fevers, muscle aches, because our body is physically now dependent on this. So it's not just the feeling of I feel like I want to keep doing this, or my mind's bringing me back there. But our physical body is now chemically dependent on this. And when we talk about chemical dependencies, it's also important to realize that not all dependencies might be a bad thing or might cause a problem. For example, someone with diabetes, they need insulin. And so their body is dependent on that chemical, on that substance. They need that substance to keep having a healthy life. So in that case, it's a chemical dependency that their body needs, but it's not the negatives ones we might think of when people are thinking of drug addictions. Because it's when it turns into an addiction, when the chemical dependency we have turns into an addiction, which means that you continue taking the substance despite the harm to your life, that's when it turns into a major problem in our lives. So as we know, someone with diabetes that needs insulin, that is something, a dependency they need, but it's not an addiction because it's not causing harm to their lives. That is helping their lives. That's helping them have those healthy lives. So that's the important distinction here, is that we have these chemical dependencies and some of them are necessary for us, for our well-being. But it's when the chemical dependency turns into an addiction, when we keep doing it despite it causing harm to ourselves, that's when the major problems arise. And that's where we need to be very careful. And so again, this is not just a sentiment of feeling dependent, but a physical altering of the brain. And so science shows us that multiple sections of the brain that are key to our lives are truly impacted by these chemical dependencies. For one, for example, the basal ganglia is a part of the brain that that helps us provide healthy motivation and healthy habits and routines. So, we might feel like we don't want to go to the gym, but we go and we feel good about it. And it might create this healthy habit where, I'm motivated to go because I know I'm going to feel good and I'm going to keep that healthy habit up. I'm not a runner, but I always think this about people who are running because I can't imagine going out for long runs every day. But runners, I imagine, they must have this wonderful, healthy habit of this motivation that I know it's going to be hard, but I want to do it. I'm going to feel good. My body's going to feel healthy doing this, so I want to keep doing it. And it creates this motivation and these healthy habits and routines. When we insert a chemical dependency, such as drugs, into this healthy routine, it overrides it. It breaks it. Because suddenly what was causing us that motivation, that was giving us that joy, that peak, it no longer is, because now that substance has taken over. So now the circuit begins to adapt, thinking, okay, the motivation or the habit that I'm trying to keep is to keep this substance. And it breaks. Not only does it turn us, keep us in a habit with that substance, but it moves us away from those healthier habits we were having. And in many cases, completely ruins our motivation cycle. So now we're no longer motivated to do much other things, and we're stuck in this circle, this loop of addiction. And that's where these chemical dependencies, again, just showing really quickly here, really physically impacts our brain. So again, it's not just because someone got into this that now they don't feel motivated, it's on them. Their brain is physically altering to not feel motivated by the same things anymore. There's another part of the brain as well that's very impacted, which is the extended amygdala. And that is also impacted by chemical dependencies. And this is the part of the brain that helps in our emotional processing and our stress responses. So when we introduce a chemical dependency, it triggers that extended amygdala to not worry about emotions, to not worry about the stress. However, when that high wears off and that withdrawal symptoms, because we start to feel that emotion again, the stress and the emotions, they start creeping in, and it creates this withdrawal symptom that we feel panicked. We don't want to let those feelings in. And so we're constantly trying to suppress that extended amygdala. We're trying to suppress that emotion processing and that stress. And again, the more and more use of these substances and these chemical dependencies make this part of the brain very delicate and makes it even harder to deal with the emotions and the stress we face every day. And another part of the brain that is so important that gets impacted by chemical dependencies is the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex helps in our ability to think, to plan, to problem solve, to make decisions, and to exert self-control. So this is doing a lot of our problem solving, our thinking, our day-to-day decisions. This part is really changing our lives, this part of our brains. And however, when drugs or other substances and chemical dependencies come into play, it can really negatively affect the growth of this part of our brain. And this is especially vulnerable for young adults and teens because this part of our brain actually doesn't fully develop until around age 25. So when we think of so many teenagers and young adults especially getting into certain chemical dependencies, this is really altering that makeup of their mind and affecting their problem-solving abilities, their self-control, their decision-making choices in that part of the brain. And the list can go on and on. So as we are introducing these chemical dependencies, now that chemical dependency might be thinking a little bit for us in the sense that we give up our control to that substance, to that chemical dependency. And so we get in these loops, and all of these you see that we get into these powerful loops that feel impossible to break, that feel very difficult to break. And so that's where, again, it's chemical dependencies does not just mean that we feel attracted to keep doing something over and over again, but it's physically altering our brain and makes it really challenging to overcome those without that proper reflection and that proper help. And again, we might be still thinking that this feels far. This feels far away. I don't know anyone in my life, or this is not applicable to me. But what's really interesting for us to consider is non-substance addictions. What are things that are altering our brains and our lives? Other forms of chemical dependencies we have that are not attached to a substance. One of the biggest that we know is gambling. Gambling is a very serious addiction that people have, that they get caught into that, right? And again, creates those negative cycles in the brain. It's a chemical dependency. People also have these chemical dependencies with foods, with caffeine, with shopping even. And of course, we have to mention with the internet and with social media. Social media, studies have already shown, social media is designed to be addictive. It's designed to get those chemical dependencies in our brain, that we want to open it. That habit, while we think it's us, oh, I'm choosing to open this, we're getting chemically dependent on that because we watch a video, we feel good about it, and it keeps repeating. So take a moment to reflect on what are the chemical dependencies that might be in our lives. Or maybe it's not too far along, but what are the little inklings that we might be leaning one way and that we should address? So this is again where we can reflect that it's not just certain people or other people or somewhere else. This is impacting us as well in our lives. What are the things that might be impacting our lives in this way? Might be hijacking our brain and taking over some of our self-control, some of our problem solving, some of our stress and emotion responses, some of our motivation and our healthy habits. What is things in our lives that are changing all those things that are not even substance-based? And when we stay, whatever that thing is, when we're in that addictive cycle, when we have that activity or that substance or whatever it is, it releases dopamine in the brain, which is the powerful feel-good chemical, they said, of our brain. So that messes with our routine. It reinforces the negative behavior. And again, that powerful loop continues. So this is something really important for us to understand because, again, when I went into this, I thought chemical dependencies, maybe that only relates to some people. Maybe it's not to everyone, but no, there's something that we can all learn and reflect on when we're talking about chemical dependencies and how we're altering our brain by some of the things that we're getting attached to and even addicted to. And again, the addiction part, when it truly becomes a problem, is when it's causing harm to ourselves and we keep doing it anyway. That's when we know we really have that strong addiction, right? There might be things that we stop and we don't go too far in, but it's when it does harm to us and we keep going that we know we have a major problem in our hands. And so in the Spirits book, there's a section about passion. And Kardec asks if how can we define the limit at which passion ceases to be good or bad? So saying these things that are passions, these things that we're talking about, right? When we're talking about food and caffeine and shopping, all these things, when is the limit? When does it become bad versus good? And the spirits answered and they said, the passions are like a horse that is useful when controlled, but dangerous when it controls. You can recognize when a passion becomes harmful at the moment in which you cease to govern it, and when it results in any injury to yourself and others. And I find this answer really interesting because the spirits here are telling us exactly what the science was telling us. It's telling us that when we're in control of it, when we can manage it, that's fine. But when that thing takes over, when that substance, that activity, when it takes over, when it starts controlling us and our lives and our decisions, causing harm to ourselves or others, and when we no longer govern those choices, that is when it's negative. So, right, the passions themselves, these things, are not necessarily bad on their own, but it's what we do with it, how much we're using it, how much we're giving it the power to take over our lives and to create that chemical dependency, that's the part that gets harmful for us. And so later in that same section, Kardec asked the spirits if there's any passions that we can't overcome. Is there anything that the minute we're into it, like we're not overcoming that? And the spirit said, there are so many who say, I want to, but their will is only on their lips. They want, but they are very satisfied not being able to. So both science and Spiritism teaches us this, that the will has to come from ourselves. And a lot of times we see people, or we are the person going through this chemical dependency, this addiction, this struggle, and we want to help others, or other people want to help us, but it has to come from within. That change has to come, because even if they say, no, I do want to change, is that chemical dependency still strong enough that while they're saying that, they're not really going to take the steps to? We're not really going to take the steps to, right? Think about social media, for example, right? I think we all get to a point where we say, oh no, I'm not going to go on social media anymore. But then we do get back to it, right? So what is that line that we're saying we want to, but where is that really coming from? Do we truly feel like we want to make a change, or are we just saying it? But when that will comes from within us, when we're truly ready to make a change, we can overcome any of these passions. So it's not that any of these are, missions that we're always going to fail. No, there's a possibility to overcome this, but it has to come from within us, and we have to be strong. It's not going to be easy, but it can happen, but we have to start that change, spark that change. And what's difficult about this, what's difficult about sparking the change, is that it's not just the activity, the substance, the item that is causing this chemical dependency. It's what we're trying to hide by doing this chemical dependency, by having this chemical dependency. Something is still holding us there. What's the good that's coming out of that chemical dependency that we like to have around? Why is that in our lives? Because it's not just about those items, it's about the why we're doing it in the first place. And that leads us to the second part of our conversation, is our soul pains. The reason why we're even getting into these negative habits in the first place. So I brought a few examples here from the book Heaven and Hell of some spirits who, after they had passed away, came back into a spirits meeting to share a bit about their story. And they are still in a state of feeling frantic about their death and about their lives that they left behind. But it shows us how some of these chemical dependencies, all of these chemical dependencies, aren't just about that chemical dependency themselves, but the soul pain that's behind it. So the first example here I have is of Francois Simon Louvet. And on February 12th, 1863, Francois communicated spontaneously at this Spiritist meeting to share his story. And what he shared was that in his recent incarnation on Earth, he was tasked to undergo the trial of poverty. So he had money, he had a good life, and suddenly he definitely felt that the trial of poverty was coming and he no longer had the means to support himself, his life, and he grew into despair by that. It was a challenge that he had to overcome, but it led him to despair. It felt unbearable. And because of this, he turned to alcohol to help quiet some of this despair. And so his despair grew mixed with this chemical dependency on alcohol, and it turned into disgust, because now he was disgusted in himself that he was having this chemical dependency, but feeling the despair and still doing it anyway, and creating this really negative loop in his life that eventually led him to commit suicide by jumping off a tower. And when he comes to this Spiritist meeting and he's sharing his story, he says that although it had been at that time that he was in the meeting 6 years after his death, he felt an endless illusion that he was still falling and about to hit the ground and hadn't hit it yet. So he knew that he had passed away, but he was in this nightmare of repeating that falling sensation and still felt that despair and that disgust and that sense of needing help and that panic. So now, in despair more than ever before, we can reflect on the fact that chemical dependency that quickly turned into an addiction makes us lose the sense of control and the sense of decision that we have, and can lead us to some really negative consequences while still not resolving the root cause of these issues. So even if you were able to stop alcohol altogether, the real problem behind it, the soul pain that he was dealing with, was the poverty, was the fact that he could no longer support himself the same way he had, and the despair in that feeling. That is the soul pain. So just looking at the alcohol, just looking at the despair that situation brought him, someone could think that that was the only problem. But even if you took away the alcohol, his stress and emotions and despair still existed, because this all wasn't solving the root of the problem, which was the struggles he was going through financially that were taking a toll on his life. So this is just a little example showing us that, yes, there's these chemical dependencies. They turn into addictions. They lead into really negative consequences in our lives pretty quickly. But what is the root cause behind this? The root cause is completely different than all of that. The root cause was the problem in his life that he was going through, and that he still fully hasn't come to terms with, because he's still living in this pain and in this suffering. The second story from the book Heaven and Hell is from Francois Riquier. And Francois Riquier was an old, wealthy man who lived alone and just had his life. He liked to have all his property, all his things, all his money, and didn't really share, didn't really have a family, lived by himself, and that was it. When he joined the Spiritist meeting to ask for help, he had joined, and he's still in denial about his death 5 years earlier. So he had passed away 5 years earlier, but he was in denial about it. And what he wanted them to help with is, these people are taking my money. These people are taking my things. And so he had left, since he didn't have much family or people around him, he had left in his will a good fortune to distant relatives. So over the years, they had come to get their split of the money, to sell his property, sell his things. And he came revolted. He was so mad at these people for taking everything he had. He said, how come they're doing that? Why are they taking my stuff? He was trying to reason with them, and they were saying that he was so greedy. So he is not even realizing that he passed away and is just so attached to the materialistic things that he had in his life. And he said, he was describing his pain, that the pain he feels right now is the worst torture possible for him not having material goods. And he simply can't survive a life without poverty. So in this story, it shows us that it doesn't have to be that substance. In this case, it's the material goods, the money that he's attached to, dependent on, and addicted to, having all those things. So even though he passed away and he doesn't need any of those material things anymore, any of that money, he feels like he needs it. He feels like he's in despair because he doesn't have those things anymore. And again, when we look into it, so is it the material things that's the problem? Is it the money that's the problem here? No, it's not. It's the greed underlying, right? The pain that he feels with being seen as less than, with not having those things. So it's those underlying emotions. That's the root behind these dependencies and these problems. It's not the money and the materialistic things themselves, but what power is he giving to them? And now he can't move on from his life because there he is in the spirit world, not needing any of this any longer, but still attached to it, still attached to that same exact thing in the same exact place. So people don't become dependent because of the substance. They become dependent because something hurts inside. So there's something underlying that substance. That's the root of the problem. So, right, the substance or the item or the activity, that is our temporary relief. So we do something once because, oh, that's a temporary relief. I felt good about it in that moment. And then the dependency comes in when we keep looping that, when we keep doing it over and over again because we want to keep repeating that feel-good feeling we had the first time. But nowhere in that are we solving the root of the issue, which is the unresolved pain. And the unresolved pain, no matter how long we stay trying to avoid it and ignore it, if we never go to confront it, to deal with it, it's going to remain unresolved. That unresolved pain within us is going to remain unresolved until we face it. So this shifts the focus from not how can I stop this bad behavior, but how can I understand and transform the pain behind it? And this leads into our last section of today's conversation, which is self-healing. Taking that moment to not just try and push things away all the time, but how can we open our eyes to what am I feeling underneath this? How did this impact me? And how can I make a change so I can move on from it? One example that comes to mind in my personal life is a moment where I was rude to someone and I didn't apologize. And for years that stayed lingering in the back of my mind, and I just kept ignoring it. Like, oh, one day it'll be fine. One day it'll be fine. One day. And I kept ignoring it and just leaving that unresolved pain, because after what was initially an anger turned into me feeling guilty and feeling bad. And I felt so bad that I didn't have a chance to apologize to that person. And it took me years. And one day I said, you know what? I'm going to resolve this. I'm going to reach out to that person and apologize. And once I did, it was incredible, the shift of that suffering, that pain, that turmoil that was within me dissipated, because I needed to go back and resolve that conflict. So we need those conflicts that we have, those struggles, those pains we feel inside of us. It really needs us to make that step to make a change, because without it, it's going to remain unresolved and it's going to be sitting in the back of our minds, and we're always going to come back to it and think about it. So again, the self-healing portion of this is so important to change our mindsets, to not stopping the behavior, but understanding what's behind it and how can we transform that. In the Spirits book, question 919, Kardec asks the spirits, what's the most effective means for improving oneself in this life and for resisting the draw of evil? So how can we improve ourselves? What's the best way that we can keep improving ourselves? And the spirits answered quite simply, a sage of antiquity has told you, know thyself. Know thyself. That's it. Know ourselves. Taking a moment to reflect on ourselves is the best way for us to improve. Because when we keep pretending that we didn't do that thing wrong, or that we're not chemically dependent on something, or we're not trying to hide our feelings, when we keep pretending that, we're not solving anything in our lives. We're not improving anything. It's when we reflect on our lives and say, you know what, that thing I did, that wasn't so great. How can I fix that? Or I really need to get better at doing this. When we reflect on who we are, what we are good at, what we're not good at, what we need help with, that's when we can take the right steps to improving ourselves. If we're hiding that, if we're in denial, those things are not going to improve. They're just going to sit there waiting for us eventually to get to it one day. So we need to be honest with ourselves. Out of everyone in the world, we need to be honest with ourselves of who we are. What are the things we're struggling with and we need help with? And of course, it isn't fun to make a mistake, to do something wrong, to do something we regret, or have any kind of pain. Of course, we don't want that. But as the more we hide from it, the more it remains there, eating at us until we go back to resolve it. So I know those difficult moments in our lives really stink to go through, but how can we reflect and try and get through those moments instead of just pushing it away for it to come up a later time? And in the Gospel according to Spiritism, there is the famous section of the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus took a moment to stop his travels to share words of wisdom and guidance with those that were following his journey. And in this is the section of the Beatitudes, which is very well known. And in one section, Jesus says, "Blessed are the afflicted, for they shall be consoled. Blessed are they which do hunger for thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are they which have persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." So when we first hear, blessed are the afflicted, it seems counterintuitive. What do we mean being afflicted, having struggles means that we're blessed, right? It feels pretty much the opposite of that. But what Jesus was trying to tell us in this moment is that it's through the challenges in our lives that are the best opportunities for us to continue learning and developing ourselves. And suddenly we can shift this perspective from this big struggle in our lives. What's the opportunity here for me to learn, for me to grow? And that simple shift, while it may seem counterintuitive at first, makes a huge difference when we're tackling our problems. Again, no one wants to have problems. No one wants to go through struggles, but the truth is we will. We're on earth, we're here to learn, so we're going to be getting challenge after challenge, but how can we turn that into a learning opportunity so that we truly improve our lives? And this leads us to this mindset shift, this idea that the situation's the same. We're going to go through that challenge no matter what because we need to learn from it. But by just switching our mindset, it can make a huge difference. Again, the same situation, but looking at it from two different lenses can completely help you in a situation. When we look at something through a fixed mindset, we see every little mistake and we think, I'm a failure. When we look at it from a growth mindset, we say, oh, I made a mistake, so now I can learn from this. Now I won't make that mistake again. Now I'm going to grow. So it suddenly shifts from I failed, so therefore I am a failure, to I failed, so therefore I am learning. Just that one word shift. I failed, so therefore I am a failure versus I am learning. That one shift in that one word makes a huge difference because we give ourselves the grace to be imperfect, to learn, to grow. We give that grace to other people. When other people make a mistake, we said, that's okay. Don't worry, we'll get through this. But when we make it, we're so hard on ourselves. So it's important for us to shift our mindsets to these growth mindsets. And when we see a challenge, as hard as it is, when we can shift our mindset to thinking, I can get through this. I can learn from this opportunity and I can grow, and it'll be difficult, but I'm going to get to the other side and I'll be stronger. We will feel much more motivated and empowered to overcome that challenge. So the challenge is going to be there, but at least if we feel that motivation, that path forward, we feel guided and ready to persevere. In the book, Courage by Chico Xavier, there is a message titled Setbacks that says exactly this. And it says, in the presence of any setbacks, think about goodness. So that's a really quick and simple exercise that we can always do. When we're in the moment of a setback, when something happens, a mistake, or we're just getting mad at the person driving in front of us on the road, think about goodness. Think about flipping your mindset into something positive. So maybe you missed a meeting. Maybe that happened in your favor. Maybe there was a reason you didn't get to that meeting so that something else could happen. Maybe that achievement that you really wanted, maybe it got postponed. You didn't get it this year. Well, maybe that happened so that when it does come, it's at the right time in your life. A car that broke down, maybe that prevented you from being in an accident or getting into some other complications. A cold that you caught, that you feel so sick, maybe that was a blessing in disguise to go to the doctor and find out some other issue that you had that you wouldn't have noticed otherwise. That person in front of you in traffic that's going so slow, maybe they're going through a challenge themselves and they are carrying a bowl of soup, a hot soup that they can't spill, and that's why they're just taking their time. And for us, we're working on our patience. So when all these little moments of frustration, of failure, mistakes that happen in our lives, it's important for us to shift this mindset of maybe there's another reason. This isn't happening just to annoy me. This isn't happening just to mess with me. But what is the goodness happening behind this? And we're not going to know, right? There's problems. Most of our problems are going to come up and we're going to have no idea what the goodness is behind it, right? It's going to feel like, oh, I can't believe this thing is happening to me. But what we can know and remind ourselves is we don't have to know what, but there is some goodness behind it. There's some good that this situation is doing for us and for others around us. And so it helps us take a moment to reflect and calm ourselves down instead of getting riled up and frustrated and angry and letting those emotions take over. So whenever there's a tough situation, if we can get that glimmer of goodness, we can change the entire situation around. And all it takes is shifting our mindset. And so one concept that I've been working on and I've been hearing a lot at work and in other places is the concept of failing well. So the fact is we're going to be going through challenges, and our whole lives we're going to have challenges and things we need to overcome. So we need to get better at failing well, because the truth is we're going to fail at some points. We're going to get through hard moments and feel that pain, but how do we overcome that well? And one concept, especially with this failing well, is failing fast. And it's been going around corporate offices lately, because shifting your mindset, and when people think that they're afraid to fail, they're afraid to make a mistake, that they tend to not voice it. If they find an issue, they might kind of hide it as long as possible because they don't want to cause a bigger issue. But when we foster a culture of failing fast, of saying, it's okay, you found a mistake, thank you, let's help fix this, and we're not pointing fingers, that switches the mindset to saying, oh, okay, maybe I made a mistake, maybe I failed in something, but I feel empowered to keep going, to not do that again, to learn from my mistakes and get better. And it's a really big shift. And I've experienced that a couple times as I've started working in the corporate world, where everyone makes mistakes sometimes. But when you can admit that and say, I'm sorry, I really made this mistake. How can I help? How can I learn? You learn and grow. And I promise that I will never make those same mistakes because I've learned from them. So it's not about the failures. It's about the things we learn in those moments. And when we can shift our mind to focus on that, we can move forward and we can tackle those pains and those struggles in our lives. And of course, we're talking about self-healing. And again, in the very beginning, we talked about how healing comes from within. But we have to remember that we always have support. There's always people around us to guide us. And even if we're in a desert with no one else around, we have our spiritual mentors always there to guide us. So again, it does have to come from within. It does have to come from us, and we're going to have to do the majority of the work. But there are people and spiritual mentors to help guide us and give us the strength and the courage and perseverance we need in those moments. In the Spirits book, Cardas asked the spirits in question 660, does prayer make people feel better? And the spirits answered, yes, because those who pray fervently and confidently strengthen themselves against the temptations of evil, and God sends them good spirits to assist them. Such help is never refused when sincerely asked for. So you can know that when you're in a moment, when you sincerely need help, when you sincerely ask for that help, and the will is coming from inside of you, it's your want, and you're asking for that help, guidance will be there. We will get that support. So it's important for us to keep that in mind. And I know for me, sometimes you're going through a challenging moment and you can't even get well-worded thoughts out. It's not about that. It's not about well-worded thoughts or rituals or being at a specific place. If we can just take a moment to sincerely say, please help me, I need help in this moment, that guidance will come. And again, our problem's not going to go away, but we will get some strength, some courage to get through that situation. And it's important to remember that when we're looking for this help, when we do a prayer, help can come in various forms. And usually it's not how we expect it. So keep an open mind to things that come up around you, to guidance that may come up. I remember the other day when I was going through a stressful moment and I stopped to say, let me take a moment to pray. And again, I couldn't get out too many eloquent words, but I could stop and say, help me in this moment. How can I overcome this? And after that prayer, I felt much calmer. I felt better. I said, okay, I'm ready to keep going ahead with my things. And I heard this inspiration, this voice in my head that said, open up a message from the book Happy Life. And I almost ignored it. I said, no, I don't have time for that. But I said, no, wait, let me go back. Let me just open the message and read it. And when I opened to a random page, it was exactly the message that I needed for that moment, for that exact situation that I was struggling with. So I didn't know what help I was looking for, what help I was going to receive, but listen to those little intuitions. Be aware of those things that might come up, that maybe it's a friend inviting you to go on a walk and you feel like, why does that help? But maybe it'll help you talk it out, get outside, connect with nature. So be open-minded to the things that come up when we're asking for help that might be help in unexpected ways. But know that when sincerely asked, help will always be provided. Help will always be there to give us that strength and courage we need to help heal ourselves. So we are all on individual journeys, but we're in a collective setting. We are together. And in the Gospel according to Spiritism, in chapter 25, they remind us to help ourselves so that heaven can help us. And the spirits say, you will find stones under your feet. Look and remove them yourself. We will give you the strength you need if you wish to use it. So there's stones, there's problems under us, and they're saying, look and remove it yourself. So you got to do it yourself. Try and take those stones out yourself. But we will give you the strength you need to keep doing this. So again, that shift in knowing that, yeah, it's going to be hard. We have to get through this ourselves, but there is that help and support. And even when we feel broken down, help is not someone coming to do it for us. It's the support we need to tackle our challenges. Because when we can tackle our challenges, we heal that root problem, that root unresolved pain, and that leads us to back into our healthy habits. Instead of having these negative chemical dependencies, we fall back into our healthy habits because there's no longer that pain deep down that I'm trying to hide with this chemical dependency. So that is why it's so important that not only are we trying to get rid of our bad habits, but we're focusing on the underlying issues, the underlying soul pains that we have that are causing these bad habits. And so I will take a moment here before we get to our final closing message. I'll take a moment here to open up and see if there are any questions anyone has that they would like to share.
Hello, Beatriz. Thank you so far. We don't have questions on the charts, but I have a question, and I would love to, if possible, for you to develop a bit on. You mentioned very well the pains that are behind the chemical dependencies, and bear in mind that we are all immortal beings, immortal spirits. And now if we take these reflections that you just presented to us and helping us to think about, now could you develop a bit about what would be the best way that parents could help the reincarnated spirit that perhaps may bring tendencies or pains in the soul, so that they don't go towards the root of chemical dependence to compensate that? How could parents help that? Could you develop a bit on that?
Yeah, that is a great question. Thank you. And so, yeah, it's important to remember, and that's a great point, right? From the immortal lens that Spiritism can bring us, that some of these soul pains might not even be coming from things we did in this incarnation, right? They could be coming from many previous incarnations, and we might not know the exact root of where that's coming from, but we can feel some kind of turmoil within us. Is that greed? Is that a certain tendency? How can we tackle that? Maybe we don't know where that greed or that tendency is coming from. And that's okay. It's coming from past lives. We don't know where, but how can we tackle what we're seeing and feeling right now? But it's a great point that you mentioned about parents and for children, because when we talk about everyone is on their own self-healing journey and everyone has to, kind of heal themselves from within, it's important to note that for children, the adults around them do have the responsibility to support them, right? We are not expecting that children are going to have all the tools they need to heal themselves. So that is why it's definitely, especially important for parents or loved ones or adults that are around children to support them in navigating the pains they feel. They might feel pains and not understand what it means, not being able to process and comprehend the differences between the pains they feel and how they want to erase it. And that's why so much help and support, teaching them about prayer, helping them talk through their emotions is so important. So that is a great point that you bring up, because while of course we're all on this individual journey, we have to remember that children are still in a phase where they need support. And as adults, we're required to help them and give them that support. And really that education from a younger age can help them in those moments where they feel like they might go into a path, because again, the brain's not fully developed yet. So if they feel like they might go into a wrong path, that education that we can provide them can remind them and bring them back to the path of good, right? If they can remember, let me do a quick prayer right now, that can make all the difference in helping them not fall into some of the dangerous slopes, especially when their brain is not fully developed to fully make those decisions themselves yet.
So yes, thank you. Because even if the brain is not developed, but the emotions from the previous existence or experiences are here already manifesting, isn't it, when we consider the youth and the children? The reason that I bring that up, I like the example that you brought, the one spirit who were brought to the spiritist meeting and said, has difficulty in adapting in the poverty, because in previous existence has a different reality and richness, let's say. So that again, the tendencies, they are, as the spirits say, from very early age on. So it's very important when we consider the damage that the chemical dependencies can cause in the soul and the physical body, so that parents may also be invited to study their child from a spiritual perspective, and understanding that sometimes they may bring pains from previous existences. They can help them to nourish them through, as you rightly said, the education, and also pay attention through the habits that they may be bringing, because the early age is an age of healing too, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And the things that, right, again, we know youth are already coming in with so many soul pains from previous lives, previous challenges that they've gone through, even if it wasn't in this life. And it's what's nice is that childhood is such a malleable time of the brain. And, Spiritism tells us this, and science tells us this, because your brain is still developing, your spirit is still developing. And so there's this time to be malleable, to learn, to soak in information. So when youth can get that support they need early on, to get that understanding, that education, talking through their emotions, their feelings, it can make a huge difference. And they, exactly like you said, they can solve so many of those soul pains that they might not even realize they're having, right? Because they can't fully understand it, but they can help start healing a lot of those early on.
Parents there as instruments to redirect their focus, their attention, and also, as you rightly said, at home, favoring the space that they can talk about. In the old generations, we as children didn't have any voice, we couldn't express ourselves. But right now, in the 21st century, that is pretty much required, that children have the ability to express their feelings, and even parents listen to them so that they can help in their healing process too, because in the end of the day, it's not the body, it's the soul who is behind the body, who is bringing the pains in it. Yeah. Thank you very much for your clarification and bringing up this profound subject. I'm aware that the time is very limited comparing the distinction of whatever we could go through, but this is where we are today. And in that way, I would hand it over to you, if it's possible for you to do the final reflections and the prayer. Would that be possible?
Yes, thank you so much. And as we all leave here today, I hope we can all reflect on what are the pains we have? What are we good at? What do we struggle with? What do we might need help with? What do we want to learn? And start that process of knowing ourselves, of believing in ourselves, so that we can make that change in our lives. And just to finalize here, I brought a quick message from the book Among Brothers of Other Lands by Chico Xavier, and just an excerpt of it, which says, "A problem becomes difficult only when you suppose it is hard." And I'll just read that again, because I've been reflecting on this message a lot myself. And it's really helped me change my mindset that a problem becomes difficult only when you suppose it is hard. Visualize a definite goal, exactly what you want to do. Believe in yourself, help yourself. And if you make mistakes, begin again. Earthly life is a school. In it, there is a lesson for each of us. Be tranquil, labor, and keep faith in God. And now we'll take us into our final prayer, taking a moment to connect with our mentor spirits, with God, Jesus, thanking them for always supporting us, being there to guide us in ways that we might not even understand right now. Taking a moment to be proud of ourselves, confident in ourselves, give ourselves grace, and the courage we need to work on our self-healing. Knowing that we're imperfect spirits going through challenges each and every day, but step by step, we'll keep improving. Thank you for this moment and for these endless opportunities to grow. And so be it. Thank you all again so much for being here, and thank you. And I'm so excited that we're kicking off an April of wonderful studies.
Thank you very much for your presence, for your time that you allocated to be with us, and facilitated the theme that you presented today, and hope in the future we have other opportunities. At the same time, all of those who are with us, just to remind you that we carry on with our program, and later on today in Portuguese, 8 p.m., we will have the presence of Vanessa Saloni from the United States talking about, in Portuguese, pensamento, imagem, cérebro e cura. So feel welcome, all of you. And for you, Beatriz, thank you very much once more. Much peace to you, to your family, and hope to see you soon. And much peace to all of you who have been with us, or perhaps those who may join us later on. God bless you. Bye-bye. Take care.